Welcome back to the Closure House. I'm your host, Jessica. And today I'm here with Liza. And she is a parent who's been estranged from her adult children. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about accountability, how she's navigated the space and distance. All right. So thank you so much for being with me.
Jessica, thank you so much for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to talk and, kind of have my voice heard and the voice of estranged parents who do want to take accountability and try to do some healing.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit about your family dynamic and what communication looks like with your children?
My current family dynamic, I live with my husband and I live with my middle child who's an adult. And we get along really well now. My middle child and I, we had our issues while they were growing up, but we both worked on healing. We both worked on accountability and are often working to see each other's perspective.
Yeah.
And this has helped me in my therapy has helped me in all of my relationships. So my current husband, I'm divorced, so my new husband, we've been together 5 years and it's helped me in that relationship as well. I think therapy helps in all your relationships, not just the one relationship you're trying to work with.
Yeah, I think therapy is so powerful to that degree. And I know you mentioned like you are still in contact with your middle child. Tell me a little bit about how that relationship stayed intact while being estranged from the others.
Um Part of it I think is just we recognize the pain in each other and we're willing to give each other that space to work through it.
Mhm.
And every child is different. I've learned that every child has their own personality and their own triggers and their own perspectives.
Mhm.
And even though with my middle child, in some ways, I was harder on them than I was on my other two. Their perspective was different. They didn't ever see me as abusive because I've asked them. They do say, "Mom, you were intense growing up,"
Uh-huh.
but they didn't see it as abusive. They kind of brushed it off as that's a mom, right?
Mhm.
Now, when I think about it, I think, well, maybe I was abusive to them, but they don't see it that way.
Mhm.
Well, I think that perspective is what's important, right? And so I take everything that I've learned and I apply it about everything I've learned about estrangement
Mhm.
and about my healing and I apply it to that relationship with them. And they're on their own healing journey. So we I think that's why, because we're both on our own healing journeys. And I think when you're both working on that healing journey together, you can kind of work through those rough spots, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the case. And that's not to say that what my other children are doing is wrong. It's just their journey, it's the way they have to handle and approach their situation.
Yeah, I really love your accountability and honesty around like how you were. And I think it's so important to know like that was your experience more than, when you're online with content, people have a lot of judgments and that kind of,
Mhm.
but the accountability, like how did you get to that point where you're like, I did something wrong?
Well, it took my eldest went no contact, and it took a month for me to just completely lose it. I sat down one day and I started to write down the things that my children had said to me, what my eldest had said to me, things that I started kind of going over conversations that we had and arguments that we had had, and started to pick through those conversations and pick through the things that they said And I started to think to myself, well, what did they mean when they said this?
Mhm.
Right? What did they mean when they said that? Because at the moment, I couldn't hear it. Right? Many times it was in the middle of an argument. And what happens in an argument? People don't listen to each other.
Yeah.
So, because of this estrangement, it gave me a moment to stop and reflect and go, okay, let's look at this from their perspective.
Mhm.
And when I sat there and started to read what I was writing, I started to go, wow, I was abusive. And let me tell you, the overwhelming amount of shame I had
Mhm.
was just all consuming. And that's when I said, I have to go get some help.
Mhm.
As I said, I think you and I have talked about,
Mhm.
I wound up trying to reach out to a psychiatrist, and this was during COVID. So there was a lot of virtual therapy that was starting to go on,
Yeah.
which was a lifesaver for me. Um, but the first appointment that I made, I got to the point they were like, "Hi, well, what brings you here?" And I just started sobbing where I couldn't even breathe
Mhm.
practically. And they were like, "I think you need to go to the hospital and get some help," right?
Mhm.
So I did that. I went to the hospital and I happened to have ordered a book called Emotions Anonymous
Mhm.
and, serendipity maybe. But so I was reading the book while I was in this behavioral health unit. And the thing that I initially thought was, I need to work on my anger issues.
Mhm.
I just thought, oh, it's just my anger issues. And then as I started reading this book, it started to enlighten me to wait a minute, no, I don't just have anger issues. I'm dealing with these other emotions too. And where are these other emotions coming from that I didn't even recognize? And so that's where the accountability started coming from, was being willing to put the work in and really put the mirror up to myself and say, what is it that I'm really seeing here? I was willing to do that. And I think that's kind of where I think some parents get stuck because I've said it before, they react through their pain instead of reacting through their children's pain, seeing their children's pain, right?
Yeah.
And but when you're willing to stop and look at your children's pain and their perspective, then you're start able to go, okay, let's kind of figure this thing out.
Yeah.
Does that help?
That is so helpful because a lot of times people, it doesn't sound like accountability online a lot when I talk to estranged parents or even when they come into counseling. It's just like a lot of finger pointing that I usually hear. So I really wanted your perspective for like, how did you reach accountability? And there's also so many sides to this. It's communication is usually the foundation of what's missed and
Yeah,
everything else. But I think that accountability alone is what can repair the relationship at some point if you ever get, to that point.
right, right. And I just want to say one other thing. Um, I have been in some form of 12-step program since my early 20s. I started with Overeaters Anonymous because I weighed at one point 350 pounds.
Mhm.
So I started with Overeaters Anonymous. I also went to, like, for a while, Codependents Anonymous. Because I was married to an alcoholic, I attended Al Anon.
Yeah.
And all these programs teach you about accepting accountability for your part in a situation. Because let's face it, in adult relationships, I'm not talking about when it's a child, but in adult relationships, where nobody's ever 100% right, right? Like there's always, you always have a little bit of accountability in something that happens. And again, I want to make it clear, not when your children are under 18. It's
Yeah.
100% the parents' fault at that point. But once you're an adult, you have to recognize that you have to look at what part you played because there
Yeah.
always is a part that we play.
Yeah, and that's so important. I think that, I see so much mixed stuff online where people be like, but you don't understand their past. And, when it comes to estranged parents,
Mhm.
they went through something, they had a hard time. And it's like, yes, but I love how you use your content as like, this is not an excuse for what I did, but this is an explanation for what happened. And I really love that stance. It really honors the accountability that you've been showing.
And one of the things that I said early on, and I still continue to say, is that intention does not negate abuse.
Mhm.
And that was where I was stuck initially was, but I didn't intend to do this. I didn't intend. I absolutely adore my children. When I started to recognize that you could absolutely love your children and never have intended to hurt them, but still there was an impact, that's when I really was able to go, okay, yeah, I did this. Yes, I had reasons.
Mhm.
Yes, there are explanations, but my behavior had an impact no matter what the reasons are. And that's what I have to focus on, not my intention, but the impact of my behavior.
Yeah. That's a very good point. And I know that like I was watching other podcasts and stuff that you're like doing this content thing so big, but I saw that, you talked about COVID and how it was helpful for you. And there was also something in there that felt like a theory about no contact. I wanted you to express that a little bit more because I think people can relate.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a therapist, right? So I have
Mhm.
no degrees, but I'm one of these, I'm also autistic. So I sit and I think about things. And I started thinking about number one, as terrible as COVID was, what a beautiful opportunity it was for people to get therapy because now they had more access to it.
Yeah.
I tried doing therapy previously, but because of blame it on my ADHD or whatever, I couldn't stay consistent, right? Because after a long day of work and masking, who the hell wants to go to now sit at a doctor's office and emotionally expose yourself,
Yeah.
right? Or you're thinking, I've got to get home. I got to cook dinner. I got to do this. I don't have time to do these things. Or I can't do it in the morning before I go to work because I can't be that emotional before I go into work.
Right.
But with COVID, because you had these telehealth appointments that you could do in your pajamas,
Yeah.
and your therapist doesn't care if you're wearing rollers or you're wearing your bonnet, right?
Right.
They don't care. It gave me the access to be able to be consistent. The other part is, and I think this is what you were referring to, is
Mhm.
I could imagine because of us being quarantined, I can only imagine a child who has been struggling with their parent, who possibly was seeing their parent constantly. And now, because of quarantine, we're not seeing their parents every
Yeah.
day. And then suddenly going, wow, not being in my parents' presence has
Yeah.
been refreshing, right? Or
Right.
has given me a little more peace. Or, wow, I've noticed that I've been a little bit calmer, or I don't feel as dysregulated, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I think that COVID might have awakened people, adult children, a little more to maybe there's something going on here because they had that opportunity to kind of maybe not be in their parents' face, or the parent to be in their face all the time. So that's where that comes from. I don't know. I mean,
I
but
think you're
I
onto
can only
something.
imagine.
Because when people came into therapy after that time, because remember, it's like an influx into therapy. And as I'm sitting with people, they were like, this is the first Christmas I got to decorate my house the way I wanted. Or this is the first Christmas that I didn't have to fly to this place because I didn't want to. I didn't disappoint anybody because it was understood I couldn't go or I didn't have to
Right.
prepare this. Like the pressure. So, like a lot of families that go through estrangement, when I talk to the estranged adult children, they tell me like They don't really have an identity. They have to perform. The only time they feel loved is when they're doing whatever it is the family's asking for example.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in
Absolutely.
COVID, they didn't have to do it anymore because it's like I'm taking a break and oh my goodness, I can breathe.
Right.
Right.
Right. I can only imagine. Yeah. I can imagine. I really think that COVID was a time of awakening, not just for the estranged community, but I think for everyone, because I think we, for the first time, because we had to kind of not just slow down, stop everything, right? It gave people an opportunity to go, why am I doing the things that I'm doing?
Yeah.
Right? Why am I living my life in the way that I'm living? I've heard so many stories of people completely changing their careers during COVID
Yeah.
because they started to realize things that were important, the things that were truly important to their lives, and how precious they are and how quickly they can be taken away.
Yeah. So people started taking chances, opening businesses, people changed careers. So much happened during COVID, but I think people started reevaluating relationships because they didn't have the break where people went to work and then you kind of endured what was
Yeah.
happening at night. People were with each other all day and all night. And I
Yeah.
something to people as well.
Hmm.
I always start that too. When I'm in therapy, I'm always just like, tell me about who you were before COVID because that's
Yeah.
a new thing for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think COVID was devastating, but
Mhm.
I think it did bring a new age in
Yeah.
for sure. I think it really brought in a new age to our humanity and what really we need to prioritize in our lives.
So a lot of estranged parents feel helpless, and that's the feedback that we get, right? From your experience, what can a parent do when their adult child decides that they're going no contact?
To take a breath, right? Take a breath and first of all realize that you're not drowning, right? Because I think a lot of parents, what they do is they feel like they're drowning, so they try to grab onto anything. And the way that looks is, let me send them a text, let me send them an email, let me try to leave them a voicemail, let me show up at their work or, at their school or whatever it is,
Mhm.
because they feel like I got to grab on to anything. They just got to hear me. They, as an estranged parent, when you first go no contact, you've got to take that breath and say, okay, we need, we both need to have a little bit of kind of quiet time,
Yeah.
right? Um, a timeout, right? And
Yeah.
I think, you know, uh, whether you agree with this as a way of working with children, but sometimes you'll put a child in timeout, right? Or you'll remove a child from a situation to kind of get that break.
Mhm.
And as an adult, we need to do that. I
Yeah.
That's not something I should have put myself in timeout a lot of times while I was raising my kids, and I didn't think of that. And I think the first thing we need to do is stop and go, okay,
Yeah.
this feels really bad, but I need to take a breath and think about this and not react,
Yeah.
because I think that's what estranged parents do, is that they immediately want to react. And taking that pause is what's going to help the situation for sure.
Yeah, you described it as drowning. And I think that's so important because when you're drowning, you just grasp for anything. And sometimes it's like taking the other person down with you when they're trying
Yeah.
to get air themselves. So having that time out is a great first step. What do you think they should do next?
Um, Seek therapy. I mean, 100% of the time, I really feel, because you know what, regardless if you're having problems with your children,
Mhm.
I really believe in therapy. I think every single person should have some therapy in their lives, especially since, a lot of this is a lot of generational things. So a lot of the behaviors of these estranged parents are because of possible abuse that they don't realize that they had, or even if it wasn't abuse, but it was an emotionally immature parent
Yeah.
that had these ideas, these authoritative ideas of parenting, or these controlling thoughts of parenting, or that I'm the parent and you're the child and you're an extension of me. Those parents are, if you don't recognize that, you're going to bleed those wounds, not just on your children, but in all your relationships,
Yeah.
right? Because it doesn't just affect your parenting, it really does affect all of your relationships.
That's a really good point. And so therapy would be the next step. So we'll take a break, then seek therapy, and that helps people to find direction on what to do next.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But what about accountability now? Like, what does that look like for you now?
Accountability means that I'm still working on it every day, right?
Mhm.
At the end of the evening, I go through the day and I think about, who did I talk to? What did I say? Is there anyone I need to apologize to?
Mhm.
Was there anything that I could have said or done that could have been hurtful, even if it wasn't intended? Do I need to make an apology? And validate that person and make that apology as soon as possible. Um, Accountability looks to me as continuing my therapy, right? I still go to see my therapist
Mhm.
at least twice a month. That's my medication. That's what keeps me going.
Mhm.
Um, Accountability for me also means continuing to read, continuing to learn, right? Not ever feeling like, well, I've learned it all, because we never learn all of anything, right? It's
Right.
not just about being estranged. So I'm always constantly trying to learn more and trying to learn where I can be better, because ultimately it helps in all your relationships. It helps me at work.
Mhm.
It helps me with my team. It helps me to be a better supervisor. It helps me to be a better wife, a mother to my child that I have now that I speak with. Um, my own mother, my stepmother, it helps me with my relationship with her because there's a lot of pain there. Um, it just helps everything.
Yeah. So then just
Yeah.
continue into therapy and the constant learning is what
Yeah.
I'm taking away from what you're saying. And that's
Staying curious.
yes, staying curious. You've never arrived, right?
Yeah.
You can learn something. And then what have you learned about respecting boundaries, even when they're painful?
Okay, so I had no clue what boundaries were. And I mean, I couldn't have gotten to the age of, I'm 55 now. I couldn't have gotten to the age of 55 without having some kind of boundaries, right?
Mhm.
But I didn't understand what boundaries were. As a child, my boundaries were stepped all over. So I didn't think that I had a right to have a boundary, right? So when my kids did those boundaries, I didn't recognize them. I didn't recognize them for what they were. Now I understand that boundaries are things that people put in place because it's for their own good. It their own way of living. It's their rules for living their lives.
Mhm.
And it's not up to me to say that their boundary is right or wrong. Their boundary is right or wrong for them, however they see to do it. And I also have the right to have boundaries for myself.
Yes.
And I deserve to have boundaries for myself, which I didn't think I had. I, would allow people to just do everything and anything because I thought, well, I guess that's okay, because
Yeah.
they were spoiled so much as when I was a child. So I think understanding also that someone else's boundaries are not necessarily a rejection of you, right? So if someone says, hey, I don't like this particular behavior.
Mhm.
And if you continue to show this particular behavior, I need to walk away. Yes, they're talking about me, right? Like, let's say they're talking to me. They're
Mhm.
talking about me, but they're not telling me what to do.
Yeah.
They're telling me what they want to do, what's important to them.
Yeah.
And I need to recognize that that may not always be necessarily a rejection of me. It's
Mhm.
what's important to them. And respecting that is important
Yeah.
because how other people want to live their lives is on them. I
Mhm.
am not anyone to say, no, you shouldn't live your life that way, or no, that boundary is no good.
Right. Because
Yeah.
everybody needs something different. So, we talked a little bit about the Oprah podcast, No Context Show. And, there were some takeaways. Some of it wasn't warm and fuzzy like I thought it was going to be, like really getting
Right.
nitty gritty of like family details and family dynamics. But on the lines of that, when they started talking about parents, like no matter how many children you have, you parent them all different.
Hmm.
That I hadn't heard that out loud, yet. So that was
Yeah.
helpful for me because it's like everybody's getting a different experience here. So what works for one doesn't work for all the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I certainly parented my eldest, which, not to get off topic, but I feel that a lot of times the eldest bears the biggest brunt, right?
Mhm.
Because you're learning as a parent. By the time you get to your second, third, fourth child,
Yeah.
you've learned things, right? It's the old joke that if your first child drops the pacifier, you're buying a new pacifier. By the time you have your last, you're like, kiss it up to God and, away we go.
Yes.
And so, yes, that first child is going to experience a completely different parent than that last child. And each child has their own temperament, right? Each child has their own ways of being. And sometimes you need to parent each child differently.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that while I was raising my children. I kind of had this blanket way of parenting because I think we don't recognize the individualism of every
Mhm.
single child.
Yeah.
And our children are not extensions of ourselves. So that's another reason why you have to develop a very unique relationship with each one of your children.
Mhm. And I think it's important for the relationship, also what you said about like estranged parents, what they can do. Also, the kids, they should also seek therapy and figure it out. Because I, in my content, always talk about how parents aren't really responsible for who you become at the end. Like, yeah, they may have shaped you, but who you ultimately become is on you. So sometimes people become while being in a relationship, and other times they're estranged and they become who they want to be, because sometimes the relationship doesn't allow it. Yeah,
Right.
especially identity. That's what I was more touching on too in my content about the critique of the
Right.
show. It's like sometimes you lose identity when you're an estranged child. You can kind of gain it back.
Hmm.
Just decide what you want for you.
I wanted to kind of point out kind of a story about myself.
Mhm.
My my birth mother passed away when I was about to turn 4, the month before I turned 4. 3 months later, my father was 24 years old. Here he was left with a 4-year-old. Uh, Therapy was not anything that was discussed. And he met someone 3 months later. They got into a relationship, and 4 years later, or 3 years later, they got married. For whatever reasons, they decided that it would be better for me to stay with my dad's parents, my grandparents, who I'd been living with as well up until that point.
Mhm.
And he he abandoned me. It took me years to really, I can now say my father abandoned me. Even though I saw him, it was kind of like a divorce situation. I saw him on weekends and holidays and things like that. But I he said to me one day when I brought this up to him, because this would come up quite often. And he said to me one day, "How long are you going to keep me on this cross?" And my answer at that first time was forever, because I have to be on the cross next to you.
Mhm.
Wasn't until I got a little older that I was keeping my own victimhood, because I realized I don't have to keep myself on this cross and I don't have to keep him on that cross, right?
Wow.
He never accepted the accountability that I wish he would have, and he never made the changes that I wish he would have. He passed away in 2007, and I never went no contact with him, and I don't think I ever would have.
Mhm.
But once I was able to take myself off that cross and that victimhood and realize I'm an adult now and I have to take responsibility for fixing myself. I tried,
Mhm.
but that gave me the ability to take him off that cross,
Yeah.
because now I wasn't keeping my own victimhood going,
Mhm.
because I knew I needed to heal. And I loved my dad immensely. Um, But I think I also recognized that he was so young when his wife passed away. I think they got married when he was like 19.
Mhm.
And my mom was actually a couple of years older than my dad. Then they had me. And then one day, suddenly, he was 24 years old. His wife is in a car accident and he loses his wife. Like, I can't imagine how devastating that would have been. Once I started putting into the perspective and realizing my dad was only 24 years old when that happened,
Yeah.
and he didn't have any support going through that. It gave me the understanding. It wasn't an excuse, but it gave me a better understanding of what he was going through. So,
Yeah. That was a really hard situation. So it's kinda like you can find some compassion in there for him and understanding now. But when you're younger, you're just like, "I was abandoned." Even if that's not the
yeah,
language around it.
right. Oh, I felt completely rejected. I felt like, why wasn't I good enough to be a part of his home? And I spent my entire life trying to be perfect so that I would be worthy of being in his home. And it never happened. And actually, when I was 13, I stayed with him for a summer.
Mhm.
And toward the end of the summer, I asked him if I could stay.
Mhm.
And again, he said no. Um, they had just had my little brother.
Mhm.
So now it was, they had this new baby, and you know what it's like to have a new baby.
Mhm.
It would have been having a new baby and a teenager, a 13-year-old. So I understand a little bit of why he said no, but that was the second time that I was rejected. And and let me tell you, I blocked that out for many years, like, didn't remember it at all. And through therapy, it came up one day. And I realized, no wonder that I walked around with this constant feeling of I have to be perfect for people to want me,
Yeah.
right? To want to be in my life. You can see some things clearly, and there's other things that you can't see. Like, I couldn't believe when I realized that I had been abusive to my children, because my grandmother in raising me was abusive. And as I was raising my children, I thought, well, I'm not going to be like her.
Mhm.
I'm going to be a different parent. And in many ways, I was, and I was better than she had been. But in other ways, I didn't realize how those wounds were bleeding onto my children in different ways. She was always very shaming of saying things like, "You're lazy." Didn't know I had ADHD. Um, just, "You're you're a troublemaker, you're a difficult child," right? These things that I already felt like I was a burden to her, because I shouldn't have been in that house. It should have been the responsibility of my father. So I had this guilt of feeling like, or this burden of feeling like I need to be grateful,
Yeah.
right? But then when I became a parent, my abuse came out in different ways. I didn't call my children lazy, but I parentified my eldest, right?
Mhm.
Or my grandmother was a very quiet, humble type woman, and any kind of noise would upset her. I
Mhm.
was the opposite. If I was upset, you knew. Like
Yeah.
there was no hiding that. Slamming doors and cabinets and making noise and letting everyone know mom's upset. So my kids had to walk around on eggshells because of me. I didn't have to walk around on eggshells for her. That wasn't my situation with my grandmother. So just because you recognize something in your own life doesn't mean you're not going to make the same mistakes, just in a different way.
Yeah. And that's why, but at least you tried something different. And that's the hard part. It goes back to what you were saying about intent. It's like I didn't intend to do this. I didn't set out to do it, but this is what happened.
Yeah.
Because, when you were talking about like, I just had to come off that cross. One of the things that really stood out to me was that as you come off that cross, the narrative's over. Now you can repaint it. But while you're holding on to it, you can't. So, like,
Yeah.
I think that the other part of this is like once your kids go no contact, you're being abandoned again, it feels like. Even if you're like, I can take accountability, it's still like somebody else is leaving me. And then it's like, okay, I have to do something. So then we
Right.
speak to, what kind of things did you do in that space?
Well, like I said earlier, I had a lot of rejection from my family, from my dad and my stepmother. But I knew somehow in my head that it wasn't truly my fault, right? Like I knew they were the grown-ups. They were the ones that made the decision to leave me there. It wasn't me asking that. When my children went no contact, that was a rejection, a direct rejection of me and what I actually did.
Mm.
So that hurt so much more. And yes, it was here again, I'm being rejected, but this time I knew. And that's something that kind of aggravates me a little bit with some estranged parents is that you have that little voice that says something is wrong, but they will constantly say, well, I don't know why. They never said anything to me.
Mhm.
And the only times I can really think that an adult child wouldn't have said a single word is if maybe they were kind of in an abusive relationship too, where their partner was isolating them.
Mhm.
And I think that's important to recognize, but that's such an outlier. Like we can't focus the conversation on that.
Mhm.
The truth is in the middle, and in the middle, and I talked about this on a video that I'm actually going to be putting out, is that the truth really is in the middle. So when estranged parents say, I don't know why,
Mhm.
I find that a little bit disingenuous because I think if they stop and reflect, which many parents either don't want to do or maybe even don't know how to do, right?
Yeah.
But I think when they stop and reflect and are honest with themselves, that they will start getting those answers because they're always looking to get their answers from their children.
Yeah.
And I know it doesn't seem fair, but at that point, when they've gone no contact, they don't have the energy any longer to give you those answers. And it's not that they want you to struggle. It's not that they're like, well, figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
It's just that they don't have the energy because they've been saying it. So it's up to the parent, and that's what I did was reflect, right?
Mhm.
It's up to the parent to reflect, and if you reflect, you will start to get the answers.
Yeah.
I went through text, right? I'd go through text of me and my children and I'd review conversations. And then I started looking at how I responded to my children, how I was responding to what they said. Was I listening to what they said, or was I just defending myself? And little by little, this picture started to emerge. And then that answer why got answered for me. And it didn't have to come from my children. I was able to answer that on my own.
That's why that space that you were talking about, that timeout, that therapy in between reading, it's helpful because,
Yeah.
right, a lot of estranged children come in and say, I'm tired. They should know what it is. I've said it a million times. And even if they've said it in ways that it can't be received, it's like, if you really reflect on it, you can kind of, what you've had to do is like put the pieces together.
Right.
Right.
And I think I've been kind of reflecting on this and been talking about this a little bit, that I think what happens is the pain that a parent feels of having to face this is sometimes so great that they'd rather lose their child than walk through that pain.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, one of the reasons why estranged parents don't do the work, because it's so incredibly painful that they would rather go, nope, nope, I'm not looking at that. I refuse to look at that. Go ahead and walk away, because it'll make it a lot easier than me having to walk this path.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I also think diagnosis has so much to do with it too. And that's something we didn't really talk about years ago, right? People ended up in asylums or something happened and people were afraid to ask for help. But knowing like, oh, this person has ADHD, it's like now I understand why I had to wear that mask all day.
Right.
I have to keep the job. I can't lose my stuff at the job. So I wear the mask and the mask comes off at night. And people mistake that a lot of times for like narcissistic personalities, but there's so many things in narcissism and in ADHD that can look the same sometimes.
Very
So,
similar. Absolutely. I can say for me, we've spoken about this a little bit, in that I would come home from work and I didn't know at the time when I was raising my kids that I was autistic.
mhm,
And so I'd be wearing that mask at work all day long, struggling. And when I got home, the mask came off, but it wasn't because I thought, oh, great, I can, berate my children now with nobody watching. It wasn't anything about that.
mhm,
It was about me being so overwhelmed that anything would trigger me.
mhm.
And I would come into the house, and I think they saw there were many things that I did that could appear as controlling. But the truth was, it wasn't to control them, it was to help control and regulate me.
Yeah.
Right. And so if I said, for example, and yeah, parents do this all the time, but if I really dug deep into, oh, you're going out for the day. Well, where are you going? What are you going to be doing? It wasn't about, I don't want you to do that, or you shouldn't be doing that. It was more about, okay, well, if they're going to the mall and they're going to see this friend and then they're
Mhm.
going to this store. All right. So that means they're probably going to be out for 8 hours. So they probably won't be home for dinner, because that's how my brain works. Instead of me just coming and going, hey, should I have dinner ready for you?
Yeah.
Right? My brain didn't work that way. My brain thought, all right, give me the information and then I'll determine how that works.
Mhm.
And it's because my brain worked backwards in a way, right? It's not that it worked wrong, it just worked differently.
Yeah.
So that can come off though as, my God, my mom wants to control everything I do. Or, for example, if they said something like, well, I have to go to these 3 different places, my brain would automatically go to, what's the most efficient way of doing it? Oh, well, you should go here first, here, that. When they never asked me, right?
Yeah.
They never asked me for my opinion on what was the most efficient way of doing something.
Right.
But my brain just automatically thought, oh, well, let me share with what I think is the most efficient way. But they might have seen that as, she's trying to control me and how I do things. And honestly, I could really care less. I was just offering another option, right?
Yeah.
But I
And
can
probably how you
understand.
would do it if you were going and like that was a part of parenting. That's why I thought one of the most powerful things on that podcast was the guy who was like, I am a great dad. He was like a helicopter dad. It's like you don't want
Yeah,
your kids to feel pain. You don't want them to go through things. You don't want them to be confused. Like you want to offer and lend so much to them and teach them things. But there becomes a point where they start feeling like, I can't trust my own judgment. That's what I get in therapy all the time. Like I cannot make the right choice because every choice is going to be wrong. So I don't even trust myself. So
right.
that
And
feels like
I know I did that to all three of my children
Mhm.
because I know that I made them feel like they couldn't make their own decisions because I was so concerned with making sure that they were responsible human beings and because I wanted to teach them the right way and I didn't want them to get hurt, right? I didn't want them to make the mistakes that I made. And I thought, well, I've learned, I know the answers to this, so let me give it to them. But what I didn't recognize was children have to make mistakes and children have to be allowed to make mistakes and to know that if you make a mistake, in most cases, right? If you make a mistake, it's okay. That's why pencils have erasers, right?
Mhm. Right.
So when we try to protect our children too much from being hurt, we wind up hurting them.
Yeah. Because they have to learn they need that autonomy. Kids need control, they need power, right? And
Yeah.
they need safety. And sometimes when kids come in and they're talking to me, they just say, like, I don't feel safe around that person. And then they'll make requests like, don't say this, don't do this. And they start trying to implement these boundaries. It's all about their safety. So
Right.
the way I describe boundaries to people, it's like the distance between you loving you and another person,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I think understanding also what a boundary is, right? A boundary isn't about I'm trying to control you.
Hmm.
A boundary is about this is how I deal with myself.
Hmm.
So, just kind of an example, if let's say you kind of don't like when people use offensive language, right? Cursing and things like that.
Hmm.
You could say to somebody, hey, don't curse around me, or you're not allowed to curse. That's not a boundary. That's controlling the other person.
Yep.
A boundary would be like, hey, I don't like that language. If you want to use that language, I'm going to have to remove myself from the
Yeah.
conversation. It's about what you do. And I think that can get going towards communication. I think especially when your kids are younger,
Hmm.
they don't understand that, right? And if you don't understand it, you're both going to be making demands
Right.
instead of asking for a boundary or respect.
Yeah.
You're going to be making demands from each other, right?
Hmm. And I also wanted to know, like, how do you navigate the grief then from not having them the way you want them in your life?
So I navigate grief very much in the way that you would grieve any kind of death, right? Estrangement has that extra layer because when somebody physically dies, there is absolutely nothing you can do about it
Yeah.
anymore, right? There's no chance there and you kind of have to move on, right? You're just going to have to move on and you get used to it.
Yeah.
But when that other person is still living, you're still going through that grief. You still go through that anger. You still go through the sadness, you go through guilt, right? All those phases. And just like any grief, you might go through one phase or another phase, and then you might go through that first phase again. And it's
Yeah.
a process. And so, yes, that's how I've navigated is understanding that this is uh, not a physical death, but it is a death of the relationship I had and a death of the relationship I thought I was going to have.
Mhm.
And when I could let go of the fact that that vision I had of the future is no longer, I needed to start saying, okay, so what does my future now look like?
Yeah.
Right. And because of the work I've done, and some people don't like to hear me say this, but I don't feel like I'm just surviving estrangement. I'm really thriving through estrangement.
Mhm.
I am very proud of my children for making the no contact decision. And some people think I'm crazy for that. Uh, but I'm also not only proud of them, I will forever be grateful to them because if it hadn't been for them, I wouldn't have started the healing that I so desperately needed.
Yeah.
They did me a favor by doing that. And in recognizing that, I was able to radically accept the situation that I'm in
Mhm.
and move forward and say, okay, I need to reframe what my life is now.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had told me 10 years ago what my life would look like now, I would have said, are you crazy? Like, that's horrible. You know, I was 10 years ago, I was married to a man that I had been married to for over 20 years. I had three children that were in my life. I worked at a kind of corporate job.
Mhm.
My life completely exploded. I'm married to someone else now. I don't have two of my three children in my life. The traditions that we used to do that I thought that we were going to carry into the future don't happen
Yeah.
anymore. But I've learned about making new traditions. I've learned about finding new joys and never forgetting about my two estranged children, but remembering that I do have a life to live. Because there is no other choice, right? I mean, there is one other choice,
Yeah, but that's
and
not the choice.
that's not the choice because I do have people who love me, right? I
Yeah.
have a child who still, and I'm not going to say, let me go back. I was going to say who still loves me. I think my estranged children, and I might be crazy, but I think they still love me. I think I'm always going to be their mother, and I think they'll still always have some love for
Mhm.
me. But right now, this looks different.
Yeah.
And my husband adores me and he needs me. And my mother loves me. And I've got brothers who love me and friends who love me. So I have to move forward. There is no other choice than to move forward. Now, you could move forward as an estranged parent and put a block there and just say, ah, let them walk away and continue in whatever kind of narrative that you had,
Mhm.
or you can sit down and be willing to say, all right, this isn't what I imagined it was going to be. So now what can I make this look like?
Yeah, we have to pivot because life happens. And when it does, we make new decisions. And one of the things that I respect most and wanted to bring you on for was because I really love your accountability, which I mentioned, but also how you help other people rebuild that with their, children. And so it doesn't feel like a closed, bolted door like it's sometimes.
Yeah.
Even when I work with people, they're like, I'm no contact forever. And I'm just like, we don't have to even get to forever. Like we're here now. And-
Yeah.
Because then they feel like the self betrayal when they decide they want their family back. And it's okay to reset, get your identity, revisit it, learn communication, set boundaries, and then enter back into someone's life too. That's,
Yeah.
if that's the,
Yeah. And I'll tell you, my healing comes from I want to become someone worthy for them to reconcile if they choose,
Mhm.
right? Because if I become worthy for them to reconcile with me, I'm also worthy to have other relationships,
Yeah.
right? And if I become worthy for them to reconcile with me, then it's just benefiting me whether they come back or not.
Yeah.
And not making them coming back as the goal is how we can do better for ourselves, right? And another thing is, I, if my kids showed up right now and knocked on the door, I would swing that door open and they could come in. And no matter what they said, I would be there for them, right? Much like that father in that Oprah show,
Yeah.
the reason that conversation started is because the child came and said, "Hey, Dad, can you help me with college?" She had been no contact.
Yeah.
She had to be willing to kind of break that and say, "I need this help. I think my father can help me." So if they show up, but at the same time, I would prefer that they show up once they've started to heal. And I don't know that they have or haven't,
Yeah.
but I want to make sure that if they come back, that they've done their healing as well. Because I don't want to go through this again for me or for them,
Yeah.
right? I don't want them to maybe not be as healed. And then I'm healed and I might need to put a boundary, right? And then that's not going to help. I really think everybody has to do their healing and is responsible to do their healing.
Yeah.
And then you can start to come together. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really profound. You know, you've shared parts of your story publicly, and I see like you're in this space that we were talking about where you're like not the estranged parent who's like, I've done no wrong, but you're also not the estranged child. So, like, you are in a lane of your own, kind of, right?
Yeah.
What has
That
it
was
been like
making
dealing
difference.
with criticism and judgment online?
Um, it hasn't been too hard because I'll tell you one thing is that one of the reasons why I make the content that I do is part of my healing journey, not just having to do with my children, but I always had this extreme fear of being judged and perceived in a way that wasn't the way that I truly am.
Mhm.
And when I started making this content, I said, all right, Liza, you better have a thick skin. Like, you better make sure if you are going to do this, you understand yourself, your intentions, why you're doing this, so that I don't allow those things to affect me,
Mhm.
right? I have adult estranged children who tell me, "You're a piece of crap. You shouldn't even live," right?
Yeah.
Or I have adult parents who will say to me, "Well, you don't know my story. How dare you assume?" Um, oh, sure. Like I just had somebody the other day because I say sometimes in my videos, I'll say, "I'm a formally emotionally immature parent."
Yeah.
And I had a parent the other day say, "Oh, so who gave you the certificate that now you're an emotionally mature parent?"
Mhm.
And I thought, this is coming from someone who feels attacked. I mean, even though they're coming onto my page,
Right.
I didn't ask them to comment, but they're obviously somebody who has pain and feels attacked and needs to take it out on me. And okay, I'll tell you, I heard this story real quick. I talk a lot, so I apologize, but
Please.
I heard this when I first started doing my content. I heard this story about Gandhi, and really it's what kind of had carried me through. And I'll try to make it as quickly as possible. So Gandhi was speaking to a crowd of people, and there was one person who was heckling him, and he just ignored them, and they kept heckling, and they would get angry and angrier because Gandhi was ignoring them.
Uh-huh.
And so finally the heckler says, "Why aren't you listening to me? Why aren't you responding to me?" And so Gandhi says to them, if someone is trying to give you a gift and you do not accept that gift,
Mhm.
who does the gift belong to? Because if I don't accept that gift, that's still on them.
Yeah.
And so I I every time I read a response or a comment that attacks me, let's face it, I'm a human being, right? Of
Yeah.
course, I get bristled. But then I stop and I say, do I accept that? And if I don't accept that, does that belong to me or does that belong to them?
Mhm.
Right? And so that's what's kept me be able to kind of weather the storm with the criticisms I get from either side,
Mhm.
because I remind myself the pain that it's coming from on either side. And I also remind myself of who I am, and I know my intentions and I don't have to accept their pain, right?
Right.
I don't have to accept they're trying to put their pain on me. I have empathy for them. And I do always, if I, sometimes I just ignore it and I'm like, and sometimes I have to say, um, s- sometimes I have to say, a lot of times my followers will defend me.
Yeah.
They'll be the ones that will jump in to defend me. And then I'm like, I don't got to say nothing. They got my back. I don't have
Yes.
to say anything. So and again, that's kind of like with parenting and this estrangement thing, is sometimes you don't have to react. Sometimes you just have to take a beat and say, okay, what's going on here, right?
Mhm.
And recognize where it's coming from.
Yeah. So I thank you so much for being on the show and talking about your story, using your platform to help other people so that they can see another side of this. And I love that you're working through this for you so that when and if they ever do come back, that you'll be ready for them. Right.
Yeah. Well, Jessica, thank you so much. It means so much to me to be able to have an opportunity to come here and speak with you and collaborate with you. I've listened to you and the things that you have to say, and I'm really moved at what your courage is and the goals and the inspirations that you have and the passion that you have for healing people. So I feel very honored to have had this opportunity. And I tell everybody, I'm always here. I'm always up for chatting. So
Yes.
if you ever need me again, I'm here to
I
help.
might have to bring you back because this goes
Yeah.
up and the estranged parents go wild. I'll like need you to like really solidify like a 12-step thing for them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's interesting you say that, because I've heard that there are kind of support groups for some estranged parents. A lot of it has to do with like parental alienation.
Mhm.
But that wasn't my situation. I don't think that's everyone's situation. And I've dabbled into thinking about kind of creating some kind of 12-step-ish type of program for estranged parents that are willing to do the work to self-reflect.
Mhm.
So thank you, Jessica. I hope you have a great day. And I love you, my friend.
Thank you, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.